What's going on, everyone? So, Neve Campbell talked about how, she read the script and they basically ran it by her whether or not she wanted to come on board. Obviously, they paid her. She liked what she saw. She came on board. And now they're set up for at least this film, Scream 7. Now, based on rumors, again, rumors, take it with a grain of salt until it's confirmed, but based on rumors, this is supposed to be a Sidney-centric film, but there are supposed to be new characters introduced that are supposed to be kind of build-up characters. Now, those build-up characters don't necessarily mean that they are the characters for the future, right? They could all end up dying. They could all end up surviving. They could be a combination. They could maybe kind of wait and see how do these characters hit, right? Maybe they have somebody particularly in mind of like, okay, we want this character and we want to build a new sort of Sam type character, in the sense of like the Sidney replacement that can kind of carry on the franchise going forward. It's always a real possibility. I would imagine that they kind of wait to see again, how does that character hit? Does that character hit in a sense to where fans are like, oh, we really love this person? Or do they kind of hit in the sense of like, maybe how it did in Scream 5, where it's kind of like, not really sold on her as the final girl going forward. We'll see. Time will tell. But also with Sidney Prescott, right? I mean, she's the face in many ways. I mean, her and Ghostface are the two most recognizable. She is a character that many people never want to see go. Now, I am of the camp of like, I think eventually you need to move off of her. I think at some point, if you want to keep the franchise going, at some point you're going to have to go a different direction. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be anytime soon. And to me, I only care about good story and execution, right? If you want to continue to tell a story about Sidney Prescott, then fine. Cool. As long as it's not the same old that we keep getting. As long as it's not another like relative or brother's cousin's nephew or whatever. Like, as long as it's not the same rehash that we've seen over and over and over again with Sidney Prescott, then fine, I'm good. Like, if you can tell a good, convincing story, kind of build this around Sidney Prescott, I understand. Again, I am of the mind of like, let's move ahead and away from her. I thought Scream 6 did a decent job, however you feel about the movie, but I thought they did a good job of not needing Sidney in that film. And it was like, okay, here's an example of like, hey, they don't have to have her in this film. But I understand now with the new circumstances, it makes the most sense. It's the safest bet. So fine, I'm on board. Let's do it. Just give me a good film. Give me a good story. And supposedly, they want to continue with Sidney if it works, right? If this has success, they are not opposed to continuing to tell a Sidney's film. So to me, begs the question of, do they just go the safe route? And of course, I want to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below, but do they go the safe route and just like create a new trilogy centered around Sidney Prescott? Now, obviously, again, you don't want to put the cart before the horse, right? You're seeing that with like The Strangers, and you're seeing that with, like The Exorcist Believer and stuff like that. But what you could do is you could tell a very solid, interesting Sidney story, maybe lay some groundwork. I love the idea of her family being involved and kind of adding this new element to Sidney Prescott of like, not only is she having to account and survive herself, well, now she's in this position to where she has to keep her family safe, keep them alive, right? Like the stakes immediately just got raised. Now, obviously, I don't think that they're going to kill any of her children or, her Mark Kincaid or anything like that. But it is going to be interesting to see how do they approach Sidney, the mother, and now her she's never had to be responsible for other people. Obviously, she loved Dewey. She loved Gail. She never wanted anything to happen to them, but her job was to keep herself alive before them, right? It's like, I'm not going to die for them. Like, but now it's like, okay, well, now I have children. Like, I would die for them, right? I would die for my husband. I would do those things. So I do think that you have an opportunity to add a different layer and element to Sidney Prescott and her character that we just have never seen before, right? And so to me, I think you could kind of, I think you need to have a conclusive story and ending, right? Like, but if you do, like, you could still lay the groundwork and even kind of have maybe a bit of a cliffhanger to where, yeah, it's not something that's like super detrimental to where it's like, oh my God, that has to come, right? Like, but I think you could do something to where you use this film as the foundation film. Maybe kind of open up some new possibilities that maybe could impact Sidney later on down the road. And now you got your establishment film. If it has success and it does well, okay, well, now we can move and transition into telling and continuing that story, right? So just say, for example, say they were to establish the cult, right? Let's say that there is a cult involved, right? So you could do something simple, and it doesn't have to be complex, to where, Sidney and her family are attacked by this cult. Sidney ultimately ends up taking out the cult, or at least the members that are in this installment. But we know that there's more out there. We know that there's this looming threat of more Ghostface that can come. Now, obviously, that's something that could never come to fruition again. Maybe those Ghostface just never come, right? So it's not something that's like, oh, we have, because they already basically established the cult-like thing, right? They've already given us all the clues and Easter eggs, and with the dreaded thread and all that stuff. So you basically already have the establishment of the cult. It's just kind of are they ever going to use that? Is that ever going to come, right? Even with Jason and Greg and all that stuff, right? So to me, it's you could kind of keep that still. Maybe this is the introduction of the cult. The cult members come and try to attack Sidney, whatever, new characters, right? Boom, Sidney handles business. Maybe the new character that survives ends up handling business. And you could even do something to where you kind of ease the transition. So let's say, you create some new character, some new Sidney replacement, but you could kind of complete this trilogy or complete, a new sequence of films, and really kind of just build that other character over the years, and then transition from Sidney after, say, 2 or 3 films, from Sidney into this new actress or this new actor, and have them kind of carry the mantle and have the torch passed. And now you could just keep going, right? Because look, Spyglass, all that, they want to keep pumping out movies. They're going to pump out movies as long as they can. I mean, they spent $500 million on just the rights and stuff to all this stuff, right? I mean, it wasn't just Scream, it was a whole catalog, but Scream was the big prize, right? So they probably still have 3 movies ahead of them before they actually break even on everything that they need to break even on. So I could imagine you use Sidney and Neve as okay, here let's plan on a trilogy. Obviously, you don't want to put the cart before the horse, but if you tell a good story, you kind of wait and see, and it's okay, well, we have more to expand on that, right? And kind of keep some ideas open that maybe you could use to expand on going forward. And Sidney can, again, I just think the cult route would be easy, right? Because you could have say 3 killers or whatever, right? All 3 are dead, and now it's the sense of oh man, that was just the beginning, right? And it's okay, more are gonna come. If they came for her, more are gonna come. And now you could kind of put this, you could tell a really interesting story, because you could have, Scream 8 be this thing where Sidney's paranoid, and she's just when is Ghostface coming? I know more are coming. I know they're going to be around the corner, right? And she's overbearing on her children or whatever at the moment. You could add a very interesting dynamic and just family struggle to the story of Ghostface. And again, you get to see the transition and continued growth and development of Sidney. I mean, you look at her from Scream 96 to now, right? I still think that there's a lot of story that you can continue with Sidney Prescott if you take the time to be creative, if you take the time to actually flush it out. Again, if this is just another, Sidney film that we've seen 10 times, and it's, another family member, or it's, another brother or whatever, right? Boyfriend or whatever, right? If it's something silly like that, it's just come on. If it's her daughter's boyfriend or something, silly. It's come on. But I think if you could tell a good story, and it's something that can be built upon, and Sidney is, the big draw, and you can kind of continue to build, then fine, do it, right? Because again, I get the circumstances, and from a business standpoint, it does make a world of sense. I just want it to be good. Like I said, at the end of the day, I'm all for whatever approach they go and however they do it, right? And look, I understand, you look at Jamie Lee Curtis in the Halloween films. I mean, she's doing it in her 70s and stuff. Like, I get that. But, I also think that Halloween and Scream are very different franchises. And I also think that, like, can you tell these good, convincing stories? Right? The problem with the whole Jamie Lee Curtis thing is that, you kind of run into like the staleness, and you kind of run into like them having to change and retcon things so many times because, it's like, how many different stories can you tell with Jamie Lee Curtis and Michael? The beauty of Scream is not Michael. It's not one person taking on another person. It's always somebody different under the mask. So I just think you have a lot more possibilities in which you continue to build a story with Neve and Sidney Prescott, but you have to do it the right way. And I do think, like, hey, if you can establish, because look, I'm never going to say no to more films, right? Like, so if you can establish and allow films to continue to be pumped out and Sidney focused, then fine, let's do it. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. Pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you like the idea of maybe using this to establish a new trilogy around Sidney Prescott? Kind of just build, grow, and expand her character and kind of lay the foundation in this film, and then you continue to have films going forward. Do you think, no, like, after this film, you gotta make sure you establish some new characters, kind of fresh start from the beginning, which, like, again, I would be okay with. But, again, how you feel, whatever your thoughts are, love to hear. Let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.